No one would argue that we are living in more difficult times. Spiralling inflation, war, supply shortages, sections of the supermarket completely denuded of stock, and rapidly rising prices in goods and services are grabbing our attention. And in such a situation, it is all too easy to lose perspective. We are assailed daily, hourly if you tune into the news channels, with pessimistic predictions of dire consequences about the future. Given all the media and information that assails us, it is difficult to keep a balanced and practical perspective about life. My comments today are against the background of the Australian culture, but I suspect hold true to many Western societies. John Gowans writes in the words of our opening song, "Are you somewhat sad and wish that you were happy? Real contentment has a special set of laws." Most of those around us, our friends, family, and associates, are looking for and deeply desire to be happy, and I believe that is the way God created us. It seems incongruous that God would have created us to live in misery. No doubt there is a close connection between happiness and contentment, and I suspect that contentment is a precursor to happiness. It is probably true to say that you will not find happiness if you are discontented, although it may well be that discontent may drive us to find contentment. Someone has said that contentment is not the fulfillment of what you want, but the realization of how much you already have. You are far better off to want all that you have than to have all that you want. In 1964, author Donald Horne published a book about Australia entitled The Lucky Country. And while the book was meant to portray Australia's climb to power and wealth based almost entirely on luck, the title probably says something qualitative about Australia and its people. Our natural resources, our weather, history, and distance from problems elsewhere in the world tend to give us a somewhat utopian view of life. And perhaps it is timely now that we try and get God's perspective on our nation. There has to be some source or measuring stick that we can use as a basis for knowing what it is we really need and how we should handle those needs. Sometimes we fail to get our perspective correct because our expectations are not within God's will for us. There is a sense in which God's perspective on life, outlined in his words in the Bible, spell out a perception about life and living that is balanced, wise, and timeless. In a traumatized and anxious world, it is not only timely, but prudent to try and get a balanced view of life today through the eyes of God.
But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
One of the great secrets of Christianity is an ability to find and know a balanced lifestyle and authentic contentment. The Apostle Paul had learnt, perhaps the hard way, to find that secret for himself. Here in this reading, he ties contentment to godliness, and perhaps here is the first clue to finding real contentment in life. Godliness is defined as an attitude and style of life that acknowledges God's claim on human life and seeks to live in accordance with God's will. Consequently, we can deduce that finding contentment and balance is directly related to a lifestyle that is lived in accordance with the will of God. We can note here that there is something very basic about this lifestyle. Having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Perhaps Paul realised that the uncomplicated lifestyle was the quickest way to contentment. He highlights this in his letter to the church at Philippi.
But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at last your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
When Paul writes to Timothy, he advises him that we don't love money. Here he is confronting one of the great temptations of humanity. Yet the reality is that in this modern world we cannot function without it. Consequently, the Christian must, of necessity, adopt a disciplined spiritual mindset in regards to money and wealth. All too often our obsession with money and wealth is an admission that we have great difficulty in really trusting God for the future. Weaver divine, thy matchless skill hath planned the pattern of my ways. Within the fabric of thy will I yield my residue of days, content to trust my way to thee. Thy overruling plan I see. One of the great challenges of the 21st century in the Western world is the intrinsic and high-profile link between money and security. Daily, we are bombarded with advertising and information that implicitly suggests that the only real security we have is tied up with our financial security. Superannuation funds, investment plans, stock market reports, the global value of the dollar, and so the list goes on. We are being subconsciously persuaded that our entire lifestyle security is totally dependent on our financial security. Now, while one would not argue against people being wise with their finances, the reality is that money and security are so indelibly woven together in the mindset of 21st century people that it has subliminally, unconsciously for many people, become their God. Such a situation flies in the face of the first two commandments.
You must not have any other god but me. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind, or an image of anything in the heavens, or on the earth, or in the sea. You must not bow down to them, or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. But I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands.
If we read these commandments correctly, such idolatry will influence and corrupt generations yet to come. If we want our children, grandchildren, etc., to have a good life, we need to ensure our attitude to money, wealth, and possessions is biblically based, as our influence in this area will impact those we love. Lord, I would clasp thy hand in mine, nor ever murmur or repine, content whatever lot I see, since 'tis my God that leadeth me.
He leadeth me, O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort fraught. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me by his own hand, he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me.
Sometimes mid scenes of deepest gloom, sometimes where Eden's bowers bloom, by water still or troubled sea, still 'tis his hand that leadeth me.
Don't love money. Be satisfied with what you have. For God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. When the writer of Hebrews advises that we should be satisfied with what we have, he is addressing one of the great fundamental flaws of humanity, that of never truly being satisfied. Basic human dissatisfaction is the greatest tool for advertising agencies who want to persuade us that we are dissatisfied and we need something different or better. And by large, it works. On top of the warning about love of money and dissatisfaction is an assurance that God will always be our sufficiency. In my distress I prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered me and set me free. The Lord is for me, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me? There may well be times when we are overburdened with financial pressures and a general feeling of dissatisfaction about our personal situation, and it is very difficult to get a true perspective on our circumstances. At such times, the words of the psalmist provide wise and practical counsel. In my distress, I prayed to the Lord, and the Lord answered me and set me free. When God sets us free, we are free indeed, free from the opinions and judgments of others. Right from the beginning of the Bible, God wanted humanity to have a correct perspective on wealth and possessions. Indeed, as the Creator, everything belonged to Him. The land really belongs to me, so you can't sell it forever. You are only foreigners and travellers living for a time on my land. This is my Father's world, oh let me ne'er forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. I would be the first to acknowledge that in a world torn by war, greed, and strife, it is sometimes very difficult to grasp the fact that God is really in control, and the majority opinion is that He is not. Yet I have lived long enough to know that majority opinion is more often than not skewed and corrupted by selfishness and self-interest, and it cannot be trusted as our measuring stick. The nation that gave us the religious reformer Martin Luther was all too easily mesmerized and led astray by the evil dictator Adolf Hitler. Humanity needs a moderator outside itself to help it get a balanced perspective about life and living. And since no human being is perfect and totally objective in their attitudes or their view of life for that matter, we must of necessity fall back on the Creator as the only one who is perfect, balanced and objective, he who has humanity's best interest at heart. When God promised the land of Canaan to the Israelites in Leviticus 25, he wanted them to understand that he was the rightful owner. God wanted his chosen people to understand that mankind can never possess exclusively. Our attitude to our material possessions should be that of caretakers, and if that is our perception, we will be all the more ready to share, a mindset that is difficult if we have a materialistic concept of possessions. As God's stewards, we are managers and not owners. There is no denying it. We are living in challenging times, and people are asking, where is God in all this chaos? In a world besotted by power and fame, and beguiled by greed, materialism and consumerism, God may well be shouting at us to recalibrate our mindsets and our attitudes. It's not so much a matter of having what we want, but rather being content to have what we need. In his rather challenging song, Beauty for Brokenness, Graham Kendrick writes of our world situation. Lord, end our madness, carelessness, greed. Make us content with the things that we need.